Mexico, 2010. The city is shrouded in the silence of the night, and only the light of the street lamps softly falls on the empty sidewalks. In a prestigious area of Mexico City, behind high gates and dense tree crowns, there was a house that seemed to be the embodiment of the ideal. Snow-white walls, a well-kept garden, a luxurious interior. But on this night, when the whole world was sleeping, a tragedy began here that would shake the country and turn into one of the most intricate mysteries of our time. Paulette Gebara Farahi was a girl with an angelic face and a kind heart. Her eyes shone despite the physical limitations that fate imposed on her from birth. Her parents, Lisette Farahi and Mauricio Gebara, were representatives of the elite. Lisette, a lawyer with an impeccable reputation, was always a strong, purposeful woman. Her lifestyle and manners spoke of strictness and high expectations. Mauricio, a businessman with a bright smile, was known for his charisma and negotiating skills. Together, they were a model couple, but their union was not without its problems. Behind the luxury and glitter, there were problems. Financial difficulties, tense relationships, and increasing pressure from society were creating cracks in their family idyll. Paulette was more than just a child for them. She was a symbol of their struggle for happiness, for preserving the image of an ideal family. On that evening of March 22, 2010, the usual routine reigned in the house. Paulette, as always, had dinner with her nannies, who not only looked after her, but also became her close friends. Her room was filled with toys and books, and on the bedside table stood her favorite stuffed animal. When Lisette said goodnight to her daughter, she did not yet know that this would be their last meeting. The next morning, Lisette found Paulette's bed empty. At first, this did not cause panic. She thought that the girl could have climbed into another room or hidden in a game. But after walking around the entire house, Lisette realized that her daughter had disappeared. The police arrived immediately. The house, carefully guarded and equipped with a security system, showed no signs of a break-in. The windows and doors were closed. The surveillance cameras did not record anything. Investigators began questioning everyone who was in the house: parents, nannies, security guards. The nannies, two young women who had worked for the family for several years, claimed that they had heard nothing unusual that night. Lisette and Mauricio were acting strangely. Lisette was cold and reserved, avoiding emotions, while Mauricio, on the contrary, seemed nervous and confused. During the investigation, contradictions emerged. One of the investigators noted that Lisette answered questions with mechanical precision, but her eyes did not express anything other than hidden irritation. She insisted that the house be thoroughly cleaned before the search was completed, which puzzled the police. Mexico City was plunged into a fever of rumors. Newspapers and television channels discussed Paulette's disappearance daily. The public was divided. Some sympathized with the parents, others believed that they were hiding something. 9 days later, when hope of finding the girl alive began to fade, the police returned to the house. They decided to conduct another search, this time more detailed, and then a grisly discovery awaited them. Paulette's body was lying between the mattress and the headboard. The room, which had been examined dozens of times, suddenly turned into a crime scene. How could the body have gone unnoticed for so long? Why had the smell of decomposition not attracted attention? These questions became central to the investigation. The experts determined that death was caused by suffocation. However, no signs of a struggle or violence were found on the body. Lisette and Mauricio were stunned, but their reactions again aroused suspicion. Mauricio spoke of his daughter with sadness, but his words sounded rehearsed. Lisette, on the contrary, seemed almost indifferent, as if trying to distance herself from the situation. New theories began to appear in the press. Some believed that Paulette's death was an accident. Others put forward versions of deliberate murder. Investigators began to suspect that someone close to them could be hiding the truth. In parallel, the investigation led to the discovery of the family's financial problems. Mauricio was embroiled in scandals involving large debts, and some began to speculate that Paulette's disappearance might have been an attempt to divert attention from these problems. There were more questions than answers. Who could have left the body in the room and why? Was it an act of desperation or an attempt to cover up a mistake? Years after the tragedy, the case of Paulette Gebara Farahi remains one of the most mysterious in Mexican history. It shows how the facade of wealth and prosperity can hide dark secrets that sometimes remain unsolved. The questions surrounding Paulette's case continued to multiply, as did the pressure on the investigation. The authorities understood that every step was under the close attention of the public and the media. However, some aspects of the investigation remained shrouded in mystery. The Gebara Farahi family home suddenly turned into an ominous place, where every room, every piece of furniture contained possible evidence. Paulette's room, with its pink walls, toys, and children's drawings, became the epicenter of horror. Investigators noted that the bed where the body was found looked suspiciously neat. The pillows were neatly arranged, and the blankets seemed untouched. Neighbors living near the family began to share strange stories. They claimed to have heard loud arguments in the house in the days before the disappearance. Lisette and Mauricio seemed to argue frequently, and one neighbor said that sounds reminiscent of a child's crying could sometimes be heard from the windows. But it was Paulette's nannies who attracted the most attention. These women, whom the family considered practically members of the family, suddenly became central figures in the investigation. One of the nannies, Maria, admitted to hearing muffled footsteps in the hallway on the night of the disappearance. Another, Carmen, said that Lisette had seemed extremely worried the night before, but did not say what had caused her anxiety. Investigators began to consider the nannies as possible witnesses or even accomplices. Why had they not raised the alarm sooner? Why did their testimonies not match? One of the most intriguing theories was that one of the servants might have accidentally caused Paulette's death and then tried to cover up the evidence. Meanwhile, Lisette's personality became increasingly ambiguous. Her colleagues and friends described her as a woman with a tough character, accustomed to keeping everything under control. However, her behavior during the investigation was the complete opposite of this image. She avoided journalists, refused to make public statements, and, according to one of the investigators, did not show the necessary interest in finding the truth. Mauricio, on the other hand, was determined to prove his innocence. He organized press conferences where he spoke of his love for his daughter and his commitment to her memory. However, his efforts only fueled suspicion. At one of the press conferences, he misspoke, saying, "We did everything to make Paulette happy in her last days." This phrase caused a wave of discussions, becoming the reason for new speculations. At the same time, forensic experts tried to reconstruct the exact circumstances of the death. They drew attention to the mattress, which in their opinion could have been replaced shortly before the second search. If so, who did it and why? The mystery became even more confusing when another detail appeared in the case. One of the family friends claimed that a few days before her disappearance, Lisette told him about the strange calls she had been receiving. The caller was silent, but according to her, it caused her great anxiety. These calls coincided with the time when Mauricio was involved in legal battles over large debts. Investigators began to consider the version that Paulette's disappearance could be connected to an attempt to put pressure on the family. By the end of the investigation, there were more questions than answers. Investigators closed the case, declaring Paulette's death an accident, but many were dissatisfied with this conclusion. Years have passed, but the name of Paulette Gebara Farahi continues to cause controversy. Her tragic fate has become a symbol not only of mysterious deaths, but also of how money, power, and human weaknesses can intertwine into a terrible knot that sometimes even time cannot unravel. When the investigation reached a dead end, Paulette's case acquired unprecedented publicity. Every step the police took, every detail that emerged during the investigation, instantly became the main news. Journalists literally besieged the family home, trying to get exclusive footage or comments. The press did not miss the opportunity to dig up the dirty laundry of the Gebara Farahi family, putting forward their own versions of events. Some journalists wrote about Lisette's mysterious behavior. She often avoided direct questions, changed the subject of conversation, and seemed too indifferent to what was happening. Psychologists brought in to analyze her behavior suggested that she might be suffering from post-traumatic stress or hiding something darker. Mauricio, on the contrary, tried to demonstrate openness. His tears at press conferences aroused sympathy in some, but suspicion in others. Some journalists noted that his emotions seemed too calibrated, as if he was trying to convince the public rather than express true grief. While the media speculated, investigators began to study the family's finances more closely. It turned out that, despite their outward well-being, the Gebara Farahis were facing serious financial difficulties. Mauricio had been involved in several risky investments that had failed. Moreover, he was under pressure from creditors. This information opened up a new perspective. Could the tragedy have been the result of desperation or an attempt to hide financial problems? Particular attention was paid to the family home. The architecture of the building was striking in its luxury. Marble floors, high ceilings, exquisite furniture. But there was something threatening in this beauty. Investigators noticed that the house was filled with surveillance cameras, but there was no footage from that fateful night. Technical experts said that the system had been turned off about an hour before Paulette's supposed disappearance. This discovery led to even more questions. Who could have turned off the cameras and why? If the parents did it, then what were they hiding? Or was it one of the nannies? Perhaps someone from the outside had managed to gain access to the system. The investigation soon focused on the social connections of Lisette and Mauricio. Their social circle included influential businessmen, politicians, and famous cultural figures. One of the guests at their home was the lawyer Raul Moreno, who, as it turned out, had connections to shadowy structures. Investigators began to consider the possibility of blackmail or even revenge. An important link in the investigation was Maria, one of the nannies. She suddenly disappeared for several days after the case became public. When she was found, she gave a confused testimony. According to her, Lisette often showed nervousness, especially before Paulette's disappearance. In one of her conversations with Maria, Lisette allegedly said, "Sometimes it is better to lose something than for it to lose you." The forensic examination also contributed to the mystery of the case. On the mattress where Paulette's body was found, no traces were found indicating a struggle or violence. However, experts noticed that the fabric on the headboard of the bed was slightly damaged, which could indicate that someone had tried to manipulate the position of the body after death. All this gave rise to a new theory. Perhaps Paulette really did die accidentally, but one of the family members or service personnel tried to hide it, fearing the consequences. Public opinion was divided during the investigation. Some believed that it was an accident, while others believed that the parents were involved. There were also those who accused the police of incompetence. The final stage of the investigation, when the case was closed, was especially controversial. Many questions remained unanswered. Why wasn't the body found right away? Who turned off the cameras? What kind of strange calls did Lisette receive? The story of Paulette Gebara Farahi became a real urban legend. Her name became a symbol not only of a human tragedy, but also of a mystery that shows how little we sometimes know about people who live behind closed doors. The Paulette Gebara Farahi case grew with new details, like a detective novel, in which each new chapter made the reader guess where the truth was hidden. It seemed that every day brought new intrigues and suspicions, forcing the investigation to go in circles. After the body was discovered in her own bed, the shock of this discovery did not leave either the police or the public. Many wondered, how could a girl end up in such a situation? And why did none of the inhabitants of the house notice anything suspicious? But soon details began to emerge that made this mystery even more confusing. A second search of the house revealed many strange details. For example, traces of dirt were found on the carpet near the window in Paulette's room, although the family claimed that the windows were always closed. Fingerprints were found that did not belong to any family member or nanny. This suggested that someone could have entered the house unnoticed. Forensic experts carefully examined the room. Faint marks resembling scratches were found on the walls near Paulette's bed, as if someone had tried to grab the surface. But the strangest thing was the almost invisible stains resembling tears on the girl's pillow. These findings did not fit the version of an accident. The hypothesis arose that the girl could have been alive when she was hidden between the mattress and the headboard. But if so, who could have done such a thing and why? Against this backdrop, the relationships within the family attracted more and more attention. Lisette, as it turned out, had a complex character. According to her friends, she was a perfectionist, obsessed with the idea of an ideal life. Many noted her desire to control everything and everyone, including even the little things associated with caring for Paulette. Some of Lisette's friends recalled how she complained about the difficulties associated with her daughter's condition, and even hinted that her life could be easier if not for these problems. Mauricio, on the contrary, seemed to be a soft and indecisive person. He avoided conflicts and preferred to remain in the shadows. But his behavior also raised questions. At one of the press conferences, he accidentally let it slip that all this will end soon, which caused a storm of speculation in the media. Was this an admission of guilt or a hint at the imminent disclosure of the case? The nannies also found themselves in the center of attention. Their behavior became increasingly strange. Maria, one of the nannies, suddenly resigned 2 weeks after the tragedy, citing an unbearable atmosphere in the house. Another nanny, Carla, mentioned during interrogations that she heard quiet steps in the hallway on the night Paulette went missing, but decided it was one of the parents. But the most surprising thing happened when the investigation gained access to Lisette's personal correspondence. Several strange messages sent shortly before Paulette's disappearance were found in her emails. One of them was addressed to an unknown recipient with the mysterious phrase, "I will do everything to protect us."
Against this background, journalists dug up another intriguing detail. Lisette and Mauricio had recently signed a large insurance contract, which included a clause on payment in the event of the child's death. This information caused a real scandal, forcing the public to suspect that the parents could have mercenary motives. Soon, a new witness appeared in the investigation, a neighbor of the family who claimed to have heard muffled screams coming from the house on the night of the disappearance. However, his testimony was contradictory. First, he said that the screams belonged to a child, and then he claimed that it could have been an argument between adults. The culmination of this series of strange events was the sudden disappearance of Raul Moreno, the lawyer who had advised the family after the tragedy. His absence gave rise to even more rumors. Some speculated that he might have known too much and decided to hide to avoid danger. Meanwhile, public pressure on the police was growing. Protests in front of the family's home, posters calling for justice, and endless debates on television were turning Paulette's case into a national drama. Just when the investigation was about to close the case, considering it an accident, a new witness suddenly appeared, a former security guard who worked for the family. He claimed that a few days before the girl's disappearance, he saw a stranger approaching the house and handing something to Lisette. This man, he said, looked suspicious and clearly did not know Mauricio. This new information forced the police to reconsider their versions. Was this stranger connected to Paulette's disappearance? What did he give Lisette? And why did the girl's mother so persistently avoid discussing any details about her life before the tragedy? The story of Paulette Gebara Farahi remains a mystery, confusing and dark. Each new fact only strengthened the feeling that the truth is hidden behind many layers of lies, fear, and intrigue. And even after all these years, the mystery of this tragedy continues to excite the minds of people all over the world. In conclusion, the investigation into the case of Paulette Gebara Farahi continued to unfold like a puzzle, where each new detail only strengthened the feeling that the truth is out of reach. Despite all the efforts of the police, questions multiplied faster than answers were found. Paulette's room became the center stage for many theories. Experts noted oddities in its arrangement. The girl's bed was made so neatly that it seemed as if someone wanted to hide something underneath it. However, even more surprising was the fact that some of the items that usually lay on the bedside table, books, toys, medicine, had been rearranged. This indicated that someone may have acted quickly and purposefully to cover their tracks. Police officers noticed that the curtains in the girl's room were partially torn off, and the fabric contained microscopic traces of blood. Although the amount was insufficient to determine the cause, this finding indicated a possible struggle or an accident. Among all the oddities, the behavior of the girl's mother, Lisette, stood out in particular. During interrogations, she often got confused in her testimony. For example, on the first day, she claimed that she went to bed immediately after putting Paulette to bed. However, she later admitted that she had been sitting in the living room until late at night, talking on the phone with a friend. Recordings of the calls confirmed that Lisette had indeed called, but her interlocutor refused to reveal the content of their conversation, citing personal matters. Moreover, in the videos made by journalists, Lisette looked unnaturally calm. Psychologists who advised the police suggested that she could be hiding her emotions due to guilt or fear. As the investigation deepened, previously unknown details about the family began to emerge. It turned out that the relationship between Lisette and Mauricio was far from ideal. Neighbors said that screams and sounds of quarrels were often heard from the house. Some claimed to have seen Mauricio at a bar with another woman, just a few days before Paulette's disappearance. Lisette, in turn, had large debts that Mauricio apparently did not even know about. Bank statements showed that she had repeatedly taken out large loans that could not be justified by ordinary family expenses. Special attention was drawn to the recordings from surveillance cameras installed in the area. On the night of Paulette's disappearance, cameras captured a dark figure walking down the street near the family home at around 3 a.m. However, the person's face was not recognizable due to the poor quality of the footage. Moreover, one of the neighbors claimed to have seen a parked car with its headlights off near the Gebara Farahi home. When the police tried to track down the car, it turned out to be registered to a company associated with Lisette. However, Paulette's mother categorically denied any involvement, saying that the car had long been sold, but the paperwork had been lost. New witnesses emerged, shedding light on the family's internal atmosphere. A former housekeeper said that Lisette was often cruel to Paulette, yelling at her for any misbehavior. She also claimed that the girl once said that she was afraid of the night. The security guard who worked in the house claimed that several weeks before the tragedy, unknown people had visited the house, whom Lisette introduced as friends of the family. These visits took place late at night, and the guard was not allowed to stay near the house during their presence. The investigation attracted the attention of independent experts from other countries. They noted that the version about an accident had many gaps. One of the biggest mysteries remained the position of Paulette's body. Her head was at an angle that could not be explained by accidental strangulation. The experts also found that the girl's clothes contained traces of a chemical substance that could have been used to temporarily immobilize her. This discovery sparked a new wave of controversy, as it could indicate that Paulette was deliberately deprived of the ability to call for help. A conspiracy theory began to circulate among journalists and the public. Supporters of this version claimed that the family could have been involved in illegal affairs, and the girl's death could have been the result of blackmail or threats. Some suspected that Paulette's body had been moved to her room after the initial search. This theory was based on the fact that in the first days of the investigation, the police found no trace of the girl in her room. In one of the last stages of the investigation, a diary belonging to Lisette was found in the house. It contained entries that the police interpreted as evidence of deep emotional problems. In one of the entries, Lisette mentioned that she wants to forget everything and start over, but did not specify what she meant. Each new detail only increased the dark atmosphere of this tragedy. The case of Paulette Gebara Farahi remains not only a mystery, but also an example of how thin the line is between external well-being and hidden dramas that destroy lives from within.